Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight on Living Mythology, I am proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with the one and only Brian Walker. Greetings, Brian. How are you?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm looking
Great.
forward to my journey tonight through creepy carnivals, scary sideshows, and other weird attractions.
Well, just to recap from the part one of this episode, one of the things that inspired this topic was that for close to 20 years, Greg and I used to work our state fair. It was always for about 10 days in the month of August, and it was part of my position at West Virginia University. I had to create and staff um, our display in the WVU building at the state fair, um, and work it. Unfortunately, and all this would usually go on while the fall semester was beginning to ramp up. So I would have to drive, to and from, and it's about a 3 hour drive from here. So driving back and forth really got old. So I would drive there, work 8 hours, drive back. It was rough. Um, if I wasn't needed in the office here, I could stay down there, which was a luxury. It was way better than having to drive back and forth a lot. But we would walk. Greg and I would walk the midway when we'd take a break, and you'd see some of the vestiges of old carnivals. Three-headed babies and formaldehyde, things like that. That I remember from my dad would take me to things like that when I was a kid. I don't know if it was sadistic on his part or if he was just curious, but they were always, uh, oh gosh, I hate to use the word fun to go into, but intriguing, maybe that would be the better word to use. I mean, I never shied away. I mean, I always went in with it. So
Nor did I. My father used to take me to the same type of place at the Palisades Amusement Park. They had the sideshows, and this is before they started banning them hither and yon.
well, I was going to say, now I'm not saying that everything is too PC or woke or anything like that. I'm not going there. But now the things that we saw as children for entertainment would be outright banned now. You wouldn't
Yes.
even, no, even if you're an adult, you wouldn't be allowed to see this stuff. And it was just kind of routine entertainment, when I was a kid. My mother took me to see Jane Mansfield's Death Car and Bonnie and Clyde's Death Car. They were together in the same exhibit. Now there were some other old cars in this museum too. It was somewhere in down south. It was maybe Tennessee, North Carolina. It was when I was a teenager. No idea where it was. But sinister, creepy things like that parents would be arrested for now, showing to their kids was totally fine back then, and just sort of good old wholesome family entertainment. And in going to carnivals, both when I was a kid and then having to work the state fair, and the state fair was at least sanitized. I mean, some of the carnivals I remember as a child were truly frightening. I mean, the carnies were scary, the rides were inadequate, in terms of safety. Uh, and if you think about it, it's a great setting for an exploitation film or a
Mhm.
horror film. And we talked about Carnival of Souls, the Herc
Yes.
Harvey movie from 1962, and we also talked about Circus of Horrors. But there are several other films that I think really fit into the genre well. And one of them is probably the most notorious of the bunch because it has such a long title. And that is Ray Dennis Steckler's The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies.
Yes.
It He made it for $38,000, and this is like 1963. He got the movie released in 1964, but this was 1963 money, and which is an amazing amount because it's sync sound, it's in color, it has some professional um, actors in it and some not so much, but everybody has to get paid, and Ray Dennis Steckler put his wife Carolyn Brandt in the movie. She's the dance hall girl who becomes one of the victims in the film. And the film, it's got a lot of padding in it, but it does have some great shots of the amusement park that it was shot at, which the amusement park it was shot at was called the Pike Amusement Park, and it was in Long Beach, California. It's since been razed. It was torn down, I think, in the late 1970s, if I remember correctly. It is kind of reminiscent, though, of Coney Island, which I'm sure you are much more familiar with.
I used
Uh, yeah, well, I mean, having grown up in New York, in not the same time period, but a similar, you know. And so that just sort of gives you a setting for the movie. Now, an interesting part of this film, there's actually a tie-in with Rock Hudson in this film. Part of the soundstage shooting that was done. There's some musical numbers in it and so forth, and that required sound stages was in a building that was owned by Rock Hudson.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and it was fairly close to Long Beach, and it did not have a working elevator in it. So like I think part of the scenes were shot on the seventh floor. So so everybody had to go up 7 flights of steps in order to get busy, in order to get ready for their scenes. Uh, and I just think it's amazing if we required people to do that now, and we can't because it's not ADA compliant, and I
Right.
understand. But if we required people to do that now, can you imagine all the complaints to the union?
Yes, I can.
I can't do. But back then, like it was getting the movie done. And I just found out that tidbit about Rock Hudson. I think just a week or two ago when I was doing some research on this, and I thought that was a really cool, footnote
Yeah, it is.
to the movie. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things about this movie. For one thing, he in some of the ballyhoo for the film, he Ray Dennis Steckler tried to bill it as the world's first monster movie musical, or so. I think that was the tagline. It was something very similar to that, and indeed, it's got some padding, quite well, actually, quite a bit of padding in it, with some musical numbers that are surprisingly well staged for a movie that only cost $38,000. I mean, there's costumes, there's dancers. All those people had to be, well, somebody, well, I don't know if he actually did pay them, but they probably should have been paid. And the costuming is expensive, even if you're just renting. It's a lot of money. Now, I know that he was uh, notorious for being able to get things done for the least amount of money possible. Um, and in this case, as I said, he employed his wife. He got a friend of his to be his best friend in the movie, because Ray Dennis Steckler is not only the director here, he's the star of the film as well. And the movie is really all about his character, who's kind of a ne'er-do-well. He's dating I guess you could say, nice girl from a respectable family, and he's kind of from the other side of the track, so he's no good. He's kind of the leader of the pack kind of thing, even though he's driving an old Plymouth station wagon. You don't really think of rebels driving old station wagons in
That's what the
Plymouth,
cool kids were
especially.
driving back then.
Yeah. Anyway, and I think that was his actual vehicle. So he's just driving it in the movie because it was better than trying to rent something and having to pay for it. But it's a really fun movie, and I think the Medveds, I think, had it as one of their like worst movies ever made, or it's been on lists like that. I'm not really sure if it was the Medveds who deemed it that, but it really isn't that bad. If for one thing, it does have a linear plot. So and I'm going to damn this movie with faint praise. I mean, I love the movie, but it is kind of bad. But it does have a linear plot. It begins here, it ends here, everything here in the middle. It makes sense. It's tied together. It's shot in color, and it's actually shot pretty well. It's not bad. some of the carnival scenes of the Pike amusement park, I think, are amazing. And since it's long since gone, just seeing some of the early '60s, typical carnival rides and sideshow attractions, and just people walking around. It's an interesting historical document from that standpoint alone. And I love amusement parks anyway. I went to one. I went to Kennywood, the Pittsburgh amusement park, just last Monday, and I'm going back next Thursday, a week from today. We were at Disney this year, so I went to Epcot, Magic Kingdom, and Hollywood Studios. The Disney parks are really heavily sanitized to the point where you can't imagine something bad happening. And Kennywood actually is a nice amusement park, but it's been the setting of several films, over the years. But kind of digressing, I suppose there. But I am a big amusement park fan.
Hmm.
Um, Now, carnivals are sort of the seedy stepchild, of amusement parks. Um, and carnivals are a little rougher. I mean, this does travel from town to town, throughout the spring and summer months. Um, Oftentimes the carnies, especially to a child, and I've got some vivid memories of a few carnivals from when I was a kid. Um, but the carnies were kind of rough, and they always reeked of cigars or cigarettes or booze or whatever cheap bottom shelf liquor they seemed to be drinking at the time. And it would scare me, and at the same time it was just so oddly fascinating that I kept going. You know what I mean?
Yes, I
and,
know what you mean.
and even as sketchy as some of those rides used to look too, and they were just basically sitting there in the mud, at the carnival fairgrounds. I would still get on them. So, and I lived to tell the tale. But it is the seedier carnivals, I think, are perfect, just perfect settings for horror films. And I'm not saying that the Pike amusement park was all that seedy, but the way that Ray Dennis Steckler shot it, he picked the seedier elements to photograph, and to play up that aspect of it, because it is interesting, and I think it's a fantastic setting for a film. In this movie, like I said, he's dating this very respectable girl, but he becomes infatuated with a woman that he sees at the carnival. Um, and he keeps coming back to her, and then he starts getting his fortune told. And then he sort of falls under the spell of the fortune teller. And her name is Estrella, and it keeps going on and on and on from there. There's several murders in it. It's there's nothing truly terrifying in it, but there's some good scenes with Ray Dennis Steckler in it, who's actually does a pretty good job in it as an actor. To tell you the truth, he portrays. This is not a likable character that he's portraying, and he does a pretty good job conveying it, but he also does a good job at conveying the characters. He's sort of torn between two worlds, the more respectable world on one side, which he would like to be a part of, at some level, although he doesn't seem to fit into it very well. And then there's this seedy carnival world that he's really drawn to. And as an audience member, as a viewer, we kind of get the feeling that this is probably the way he's going to go anyway. you know, uh, and it's just a really fascinating, interesting movie. And there are songs, like I said, it's a musical. There are songs in it. The songs aren't great, but one is called "Shook Out of Shape," and the other is called "Choo Choo Chaboogie." Wow. It's not the Beatles, let's face it. But they're fun enough, and they're staged well. And I don't. This is not one of the worst films ever. There are way worse movies than Incredibly Strange Creatures, um, who stopped living and became mixed up zombies. Interestingly, I don't know if you are an Arch Hall fan or not. I don't know if you've ever seen The Sadist or any of Arch Hall Jr.'s other films. EGA.
Yeah, I have in the past, but I don't remember them very much. It's been a very long time.
Well, Arch Hall Jr.'s father who had several pseudonyms, but we'll just call him Archall Senior, yeah, if you like, actually released this film under his Fairway International Pictures Corporation. Archall Senior had done a number of movies on his own, and if you've ever seen a movie called The Last Time I Saw Archie, Archie is essentially based on Archall Jr.'s father.
Oh, wow.
Interestingly enough, he's kind of an interesting impresario. He's a pretty good businessman, quite honestly, and he was good at bringing, like Ray Dennis Steckler, and he seemed to be Ray Dennis Steckler's mentor for a while. He was really good at making color films when he had the money for color on a ridiculously tiny shoestring budget. Now he was better at it, especially early on, than Ray Dennis Steckler was, and he also had more money, cash at hand. So the Halls lived, a pretty nice upper middle class life, whereas Ray Dennis Steckler, the director of Incredibly Strange Creatures, really scraped by, especially early on in his career. I mean, he was married, and then he and Carolyn Brandt, his wife, had two kids, but it was very hand to mouth. And trying to get these movies made on these minuscule budgets, and then not being able to afford rent must have been horrible. So if you think about it that way, I mean, his Ray Dennis Steckler's early movies are really made under duress. He was up against the wall. Had very little money of his own, and trying to get this film produced. And he was able to persevere, with all of that against him. So, if nothing else, respect the man for having
Yes,
a
of course.
backbone and getting shit done. Really, I mean, if you think about it, it's amazing that this film isn't worse than it is. If you think about it, it should be way worse, but it actually does have a heart. It's fun to watch. I've probably seen it 20 times myself, and I got to tell you, it doesn't get old. And every time I watch it, I really, really enjoy it. Now, I like movies of a certain quality.
Hmm.
And if you want to see the AFI's 100 best films, this is not your movie. But if you enjoy old drive-in films like I do, and really want to see, if you really want to, if you like horror films and you want to historicize your love of it by going back and looking at some older horror movies, which I think is really important, and more horror fans should do that. I think this movie is lots of fun and kind of important too, when you look at Ray Dennis Steckler's history and the films that he made. This is a big one for him. Now he did some work on EGOT, which was Archall Senior's production and starring Archall Jr. Another musical, by the way, because Archall Senior wanted his son to be sort of a teen idol, and he wasn't untalented. He actually was a decent musician, not a bad singer, um, but it just didn't have what it took. And I think oftentimes to be really successful in entertainment is maybe half talent and half incredible luck.
Hmm.
If you think about your favorite actors, especially the ones on the fringe. I'm not talking about like big A stars like Elizabeth Taylor or Gary or Cary Grant or Gary Cooper or somebody like that. I mean, if you're thinking about the people whose work you've really admired, um, you and if you think about the body of work that they've done, um, you kind of you wonder how they got to the point where they were and why they weren't bigger stars. And I can think of a lot of character actors who worked consistently, and might have had what it took to be, a leading man or a leading woman in films, but just never quite made it. And that's where a lot of people, a lot of those people wound up in drive-in movies. They wound up in deep pictures. I did read a quote from Richard Crane once, who had taken a job on a children's TV series in the early 1950s. It was Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, and the Rocky Jones.
I used to
Those are
collect that.
they're public domain. There are a lot of alpha bit DVD, alpha video DVDs were produced of the Rocky Jones, and they're fun, and
They are.
it's early television, high production values for a children's show in 1951, 1952. But Richard Crane once said he took the job because if he were going to have been successful, it would have happened by now, meaning that he was in his mid 30s and there wasn't anything better on the horizon. And TV was new back then too, and if you weren't if you couldn't find or weren't finding a whole lot of roles in film, you could always take a look at television. Television didn't pay much back then, but at least it was visibility, and
Right.
you were paying your union dues so you could keep your insurance and such, and you did get a steady paycheck, which I think is kind of a foreign thing to actors, oftentimes, unless you're on a soap opera or something like that. But yeah, if you haven't seen Incredibly Strange Creatures, or if you hadn't seen it for a long time and would like to go back and reappreciate this film, I really recommend it. Now, I'm going to talk about a director that I don't ordinarily get to talk about, but I got to tell you, this guy's one of my favorites, and this movie is my favorite of his. I'm a big John Waters fan.
Yeah, me too.
Big John. I always have since the first. I think I think I was a teenager when Polyester came out, and I saw it, and that was my first John Waters movie. Um, right after that, I got got my first VHS VCR and started trying. I actually got. I think I rented. What did I rent? Might have been Female Trouble.
Pink
It
Flamingos.
wasn't Pink Flamingos because that was really hard to get. But I think it was Female Trouble. I rented that and was just kind of
Flamingos was the
blown
first one I
away.
saw of John Waters films.
Oh, really? Did you see it at the theater by any chance? Or
I saw them in the theater, and then I collected them on VHS
yeah,
tapes.
I see. Pink Flamingos was legendary, and I just couldn't come across a copy of it, where I was living at the time. But I was able to get Female Trouble. But at you after a while, when John Waters films were being released and you could get the whole catalog on VHS, the one that really grabbed me, and I like most of his films, all of his early stuff, but the one that really grabbed me was Multiple Maniacs. I think I love it, and it's his first film with sync sound, meaning that uh, the dialogue was recorded as the camera was rolling. Um, his first movie, which, gosh, what was that called? Roman Candles, or I think that's what it was.
Something like that. Yeah. I'm losing your sound, Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry. How am I now?
A little better.
Okay. My our connection might not be the best tonight. Let
Now
me
you're fine.
close. No, I already have closed everything. Try that. That might free up a few resources there. Okay. Anyway, um, out of John Waters' movies, I've liked most of them. I didn't like Cecil B. Demented at all. I just didn't care for it. I don't think I got more than 20 minutes into it, and I tried a couple of times. And I didn't like Crybaby very well either. Uh, just didn't. It should have been good. It had all the makings of a good movie, or well, a movie that I would have liked, not necessarily a good movie. It just didn't come together for me. And that was sort of the first movie of his that I didn't really care for. Um, but out of all of his early stuff, and we'll say Pink Flamingos, Desperate Living, Female Trouble, Polyester, his early best, most disgusting, cheap ass films, the ones that I love the most. Multiple Maniacs is my favorite, and it stars Divine, David Lockery, who was in his early films. So was Mary Vivian Pierce, who's also in this one.
Yes.
Edith Massey, and one of the Dreamlanders who is still around, Mink Stoll. And Mink Stoll, if you ask me, was probably the best actress, of the typical John Waters cast. She could do crazy, hateful suburban mom, just sort of in a blink of an eye, and she was believable in all of it. So I think she's sort of the Academy Award winner of the John Waters, usual cast members.
John
And
Waters kept coming up. Today, I had a conversation with Seton of Kemet, and
Yeah,
John Waters came up. He knew them. He knew John Waters and Divine, and he'd met them uh, while they were still doing their thing. And then the person who I gave my John Waters collection to on VHS, she popped into my life after 30 something years. So,
really.
so it's like a John, and tonight you started talking about them. So it's like a John Waters theme percolating in my life.
Um, I, yeah, his other than, like I said, a couple of his movies that I hadn't really cared for too much, and he's supposed to be working on a new movie, his first one in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that turns out. Um, uh, all of my right now, all of my love is for Multiple Maniacs because of Divine's cavalcaded perversion, where instead of having a carnival set up and trying to get people to come to the carnival, they take their carnival to the suburban neighborhoods. The middle class to upper middle class neighborhoods, and their cavalcaded perversions. It's everything disgusting. There's a puke eater in it. There's live sex acts, things like that. And if you think about it, and this movie came out in 1970. And when I say came out, I mean it wasn't in theaters across the U.S. or anything like that. At best, it was in a grindhouse early on. Now, as he became better known, it would have played in more theaters. But initially in 1970, not a whole lot of theaters. Enough to make it profitable, however. In the early days, John Waters, who came from a well-to-do upper middle class family in the Baltimore area, he would essentially borrow money from his father in order to get the movies produced. Now he wasn't borrowing a whole lot of money. I think Pink Flamingos was what, about $10,000. I believe I could be mistaken about that. My memory is as good as it used to be, but it wasn't very much money at all. Um, Certainly, Cash Flags $38,000 for Incredibly Strange Creatures sounds like a big luxury.
Yes.
But it was also made in California as opposed to being made on the outskirts of Baltimore. So, and Ray Dennis Steckler probably had to get permits, to do what he was doing. And I'm sure John Waters didn't bother with that at the time. Especially just moving into the suburban neighborhood in 1970 in Multiple Maniacs, and then setting up these tents with the puke eater and live sex acts going on. The movie's a whole lot of fun. It really is. These traveling troupe of sideshow, I guess freaks might be the best way to put it. Not freaks in the traditional way, but freaks nonetheless. They rob the people who come to their carnivals, and that's how they make their living. And that the brilliance of that plot point alone, I think it's just hysterical. But Lady Divine, played obviously by Divine, otherwise known as Glenn Milstead, is the owner and operator of the Cavalcade of Perversions, and as such is the well, yeah, you can call. Yeah, I'm going to have to say protagonist of the movie, even though she is. We're supposed. I'm not sure we're supposed to be disgusted by her. I think we actually are rooting for her, which is an interesting thing that John Waters films usually bring up. Yeah, you're especially with female trouble, where she's being billed as the filthiest woman alive,
Yes, I remember that.
and that's a that's quite an honor. So I kind of like that, the twisted, sick black sense of humor, black
Mhm.
humor. Um, Seeing beauty in the ugly, I suppose, which I think more people should probably do. And I think it's one of John Waters' big strengths is to show you something that he thinks will be abhorrent to most people, and then he gets you to like it. I'm not sure it was his intention to get you to like it, but you actually do. If you make it that far into one of his movies, yeah, you are going to start enjoying it, and liking it. Did you ever see Desperate Living?
Yes.
That one I think is just amazingly bizarre with the whole other world that's set up with Edith Massey as queen. Uh,
Yes.
that's a ride, and it's so disgusting. The conditions that these people live in are just horrible, awful squalor. And after about 20 minutes of watching it, you're just like, yeah, okay. And everybody's sort of a horrible person, you know? But you still find yourself rooting for them,
Uh-huh.
which is the really brilliant part of John Waters, is that you do start rooting for this person that if you ever met out in the street, you would run in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I remember I liked the John Waters film because of that, with the altered reality. Some of my favorite films are like Forbidden Zone.
Hmm.
I like
Oh,
both
yeah,
the original and the colorized version. Of course, Psychos in Love is one of my favorite films.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it was a VHS I picked up in a Blockbuster, I think, years ago, and I'd never heard or seen of it at all. And then I caught it on YouTube or Tubi, I don't remember which one, so I got to watch it again.
Hmm. Okay, well, so it's Tubi. I saw somewhere, and this is just an aside, I saw somewhere that Tubi is getting better ratings than some streaming apps.
I can
I mean,
believe it.
some big name streaming apps.
They have things I've never heard of, and I've heard of a lot, but
Well, the thing that I find interesting about Tubi is that, and this is anecdotal, this isn't data driven or anything, but I see so many of my friends on Facebook, people who are followers of the drive and such, will post too about how much they watch Tubi, and that streaming service comes up probably as much, if not more, than the big ones like Netflix. I saw this on Netflix or something like that. But instead, now people that I would be connected with are more likely to watch bad movies, and bad movies are more likely to be on Tubi. So I
right.
get,
But some of them, like we're talking about John Waters films, some of them are unique and transcend bad. I mean, they're not expensively made, they're not well acted, they're not well written, but something about them transcends that and becomes something classic almost.
well, and I think it's because a lot of those movies were made with a lot of heart. You know, Regardless of what John Waters was thinking when he was writing and producing and directing these movies, there, there's it's all this is all genuine here, and Multiple Maniacs almost seems to have been made not for any audience at all. I think he made it for himself, and maybe that's why I like this one the best,
Hmm.
because I think it's his purest vision too. And these people are disgusting, but like I said, I'm rooting for Divine the whole way. She's robbing people who come to her carnival, even though she set it up on their essentially their front yard. Um, but you start rooting for her, and then into the movie, you find out that her boyfriend slash husband, I can't remember if they're married or not, is actually dating this other woman, and he's been rendezvousing with her while Divine's been out robbing people and making money. I see Divine's point here because she's out working, and then her man is out screwing around with somebody else, and he's not bringing in any money. So I get it. So then you can empathize with Divine's character, Lady Divine, in the movie. And Edith Massey, who's a really interesting figure in John Waters' typical cast. Her roles got bigger as she progressed with acting. She had some trouble initially, like remembering, being able to read lines and remember lines.
Uh,
The vocabulary would sometimes trip her up. Uh, but this is her first appearance, and she's about 50 years old here. This is 19, probably 60, 69, early 1970 when this was shot. And so she's 50, 51 years old, I would say. She's a barmaid um, in the film, and she's the one that tips off Divine that David Lockery is screwing around with Cookie Mueller. So Divine goes. I won't um, have any more spoilers than that, but Divine goes on a murderous rampage, and I guess gets her comeuppance at the end nonsensically, but because it's nonsensical, it actually makes sense.
I can understand that. I can
Okay.
understand that.
Um, but a lot of people have seen Hairspray, for example, or they might have seen A Dirty Shame or Serial Moms,
Or
hugely popular. And I
Lost
think,
in the Dust.
well,
And the,
that wasn't John Waters. That was Paul
oh,
Bartel.
okay, that had Divine in it, though, I believe.
It did. But that
Okay.
was a Paul Bartel movie, and we ought to do a Paul Bartel show because he did Eating Raoul, Night of the Comet. He did some great 70s and 80s films that we could certainly talk about. But it's John Waters right now. um,
Yes.
and you're right, Divine is in Lust in the Dust, and it's a significantly better production than what Divine had been in before. It has name stars. I mean, Divine's first big leading man was Tab Hunter, and
Yes.
that was in Polyester. Um, John Waters hired Tab Hunter. I think he did the movie on about a $300,000 budget, and I think Tab was a significant chunk of the budget to do Polyester. But it paid off because he is a great presence, in the movie. And he camps it up like crazy, which is the only thing he could do. But he comes back for Lust in the Dust. He's the Abel Wood, the gunfighter. But Lust in the Dust has a great cast. Lainey Kazan is Divine's long lost twin sister. Courtney Gaines is in it as the young piano player. Ned Revolts, who used to do a lot of TV shows and commercials in the 70s and 80s. A very tiny elderly woman is in the film as well. Jeffrey Lewis, character actor for years, and the father of Juliette Lewis from, oh golly, I can't remember the name of the movie now. It's dropped out of my head. Was it Natural Born Killers? She was in that, right? It was Natural Born Killers.
I remember correctly.
Yeah. Jeffrey Lewis is in it as well. It has a lot of sight gags. Very charming, funny movie. There's nothing in it too risque. It's not Pink Flamingos, if you know what I mean. It's nothing too shocking in it for most people anyway. But Lust in the Dust, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Which movie was where Edith Massey was being tormented, I think, by an Eggman? I seem to
Oh,
remember.
that's Pink Flamingos. She's not being tormented by him. She is in love with him.
Oh, okay.
She loves eggs, and the
Eggman?
Eggman comes to visit her every day.
Yes, yes, I remember that.
I haven't watched these movies for a while, and I'm surprised at how vivid my recollections are of the plot lines and who's in them. I don't know what that says about me, but these movies, John Waters films, really stand out for me. Even the ones that I haven't cared for, I remember why I didn't care for it. In the case of Crybaby, there's there's such a great cast here. The movie had so much potential, and the story just wasn't there. It needed so much more writing than it got. I don't know what happened. but there's just no story there. There's
I don't
nothing intriguing about that story at all.
I don't remember it very well, but I remember it was very predictable. And that's
Yeah, and it's so low camp too. No, I enjoy low camp from time to time, but that's all this thing is. Crybaby. It's just. Ugh. I mean, I did watch it from beginning to end just to see the cameos. I mean, Joey Heatherton's in it, Joe D'Alessandro. Uh, Gosh, I can't remember. Tracy Lords.
yes, yes.
She's that's not a cameo for her. I mean, that's a bigger role. Johnny Depp. Um, ooh, I have forgotten it now. Maybe my memory isn't so great after all, because I didn't like the movie. Excuse me. I loved Serial Mom. I thought Serial Mom was brilliant.
Mhm.
I saw that in the theater twice, and I think that was the last movie that I saw twice in the theater. So I guess that tells you something. And even better, living in a small college town, I was actually able to see a John Waters movie other than Hairspray in a local theater. Usually
Oh, wow.
we have to go to a bigger city like Pittsburgh to see more esoteric films in the theater, because all we get here is just this drivel that is aimed at children, or rom-coms that aren't romantic or comedies. So you know I, I
Pseudo
don't know why they're there.
rom-coms.
Well, I don't know why they're there, and they all have the same cast. It's like, why are we sitting through another movie with Brad Pitt, or oh gosh, what? Oh, I can't think of his name. He was Ken in the Barbie movie. Oh god, I can see his face and I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I haven't
Or
seen the Barbie movie yet. I heard it was good, but I haven't seen it.
oh gosh, or one of the Chris's. There's Chris Pine, Chris
Helmsworth,
Pratt. Hmm?
Chris Helmsworth.
Yeah, Helmsworth. It's all the same people in all of these movies. I get so tired of it. There's never anybody new.
Well, let's remedy that. We have heart. We don't have a large bank account funding our movies, and
Well,
we're all,
we need John Waters' dad to loan us some money.
give him a call. See what he says.
Hey, he might want to be a patron with us.
You might.
Uh, and there, I'm sure that there are still some grants out there that you can apply for, here and there, either on the federal or state level. Maybe get an NEA grant to do something. It would be fun. Wouldn't it? Put it on PBS. That would be
There you
awesome.
go. On Manhattan Cable, even.
Well, I mean, just put it on public broadcasting. Period. If you could get one of the affiliates like GBH in Boston, or QED in Pittsburgh. Um, I don't know what's the New York PBS.
I think just PBS.
Was
That's
I
the
mean
Channel 13 years ago when I was growing up. It was Channel 13, and they just called it PBS.
was it WPBS or something like that?
Maybe it's been
Okay.
a while.
Oddly enough, and I'm going far afield here, but I used to watch a lot of public broadcasting, especially as a child,
Me
because it was
too.
sort of the fourth network. And
Yes,
if you couldn't find anything on ABC, NBC, or CBS, then PBS it was. And some of their programming on the weekends was actually fun. And if you wanted to see Monty Python and see something kind of risque for the time, you could actually see, like they would actually swear mildly now, be considered mild now, but they would actually swear from time to time, or would have something.
Child Nudity and
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
They
remember
did.
Monty Python, Faulty Towers.
Yeah.
They used to have Benny Hill.
Yeah. My grandfather loved Benny Hill. He
Classic.
loved it. And it's some people would consider it lowbrow, but if you go back and watch it, and
It's funny,
it's horribly sexist,
but it's funny.
but yeah.
Well, it's hard. It's difficult for people to judge like a period of time before when people thought different. Like I'm a big Conan the Barbarian fan. and I've read the books. I had seen the movies. I had all the comic books and all the books, but then a flood destroyed them. But people now looking back at Conan, and Conan was going to be made into a TV show recently by an Amazon, and I
Hmm.
believe I read or heard somewhere that the executives felt that he represented toxic masculinity, and they refused to make a show celebrating toxic masculinity. And this is
Really, it never bothered them once before.
so this is we're looking where our eyes pass. When Robert E. Howard wrote the books, because in Robert E. Howard's there is a lot of racism and things like that, but there are heroes in each race. So Conan and Conan's a villain pretty much by today's standards. So you're looking at something the way we see it now and then judging them when in their day they were progressive in their thoughts. So it's a really weird phenomenon, and I wish I was a scholar so I can spend a few decades studying and explaining it. But it's really, really odd that like old thoughts that no longer apply are considered banned.
Well, whenever I'm choosing a movie of the day, I have been paying a lot of attention to that. There's some films from the 30s and 40s that are, well, and from the 50s too, well, the 60s, 70s, but particular, gosh, I, there's some films that just have things in it that either I find offensive or I'm
Right,
afraid that somebody else would find offensive, and I can't run them, or I don't run them, as I should
right.
say, as the movie of the day. Now, I don't want to exclude those as historical documents, however, because I think that's important. And it might be important for everybody to go back and see some of these portrayals, to remind ourselves of we need to do better than this. We need to do more. And this, yeah, we might have come this far, but I think we still have distance to go.
That's very correct. But as you said, these are historical documents and of value because we tend to be trying to whitewash the past,
Right, and you can't
make the
do that.
past into something that it isn't. Um, like I remember Birth of a Nation in high school.
Mm.
They showed us Birth of a Nation, and then they had us talking about it. And I remember even like some of the African American kids that we had in the class, they were saying that it's an effective propaganda piece because they found themselves cheering for the Klan.
Yeah, and what is a yeah, they're right. It was exactly what it was. Yeah.
But
Um.
to the people making the film, these were noble heroes, where to us they're racist, villains.
Oh yeah, I remember.
So
And I don't remember the actual 1915 production of it, but I didn't see that film until I took a film class in college as an undergrad. I think when I
mhm.
was maybe a junior or so, and we watched it, and everybody seemed to be appalled. I hope they were, by the movie. But on the other hand, that was probably 70 years after the making of that movie. We'd gone through, civil rights, and the portrayals were pretty broad, in it. But it's a historical document, so I don't think it really should be forgotten. I just don't want to run it.
As
And I
entertainment.
do have some of these movies posted on some of the pages. I just don't run them as movie of the day,
Right.
because I don't want to be offensive, and I don't want anybody to take offense. But I do think that those movies should be readily accessible because they are historical documents. And the best ones, really, if you think about it, you can read all you want about how the 1930s were in terms of racism, but going back to watch those movies, that's going to give you a way better understanding,
Right.
of just how people were portrayed. And it's not just racially; it's also, in terms of sexes,
Sexism, yes.
and how sexist these movies typically were. Um, and yes, it does allow you to see, how far we've come, but along with sexism, I think that's something we still need to make advancements with.
And that'll make an interesting topic to cover on the
It
uh,
would.
I've been as well. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. As always, I enjoy conversing with you both on and off the air, and the time zooms by way too quickly.
Well, we got more. We might continue this one because we got more movies.
Let's go. We'll have a part three. And
Yeah, I've got the She Freak, uh, which I thought would be a great movie to talk about. Circus of Fear, Berserk, Vampire Circus, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, House of a Thousand Corpses, which is why I wore this
so we're gonna have
tonight.
like a part four and part five to this
Why
series.
not? House of a Thousand Corpses is probably one of my top 20 favorite movies. I love it's disgusting. I love it. It is, and the first time I saw it, I mean, I truly got, you know, over some of the scenes. It's gross, but terrifying at the same time. I love Rob Zombie.
As do I, and we will cover them. Thank you very much. How can people find you and find the drive-in and become part of the 25 plus year legacy that you've given us?
You know, the driving is getting up there. You could visit briansdrivingtheater.com. And if you want to interact with me on social media, I'm on Facebook. You can look for Brian J. Walker or Brian's Drive-In Theater, and I should pop up.
And Brian will interact with you. That's how we started. That's how this whole show came about. I contacted him and we got to exchanging emails and we got to talking. And now we've been doing this for, I'd say, like between half a decade and a decade.
Ooh, I'm thinking 2016, maybe. I think it's about 8 years. I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I don't have the
Yeah,
exact dates, but it's almost but not quite a decade, and it's still going strong. And we have dreams for the future.
very good.
So have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too, Hercules. Good night.
Thank you, and good night to all who've tuned in. Until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys and amazing adventures.